Today, Mr. Vershbow will elaborate on the threats NATO is facing and how it is responding in the light of the upcoming Warsaw Summit in July. Mr. Vershbow, the floor is yours.
Because NATO is as important to our collective security now as it has ever been. Our common security, stability, and prosperity may not be guaranteed by NATO alone, but they would all be at much greater risk without it. So that's why today I want to outline the threats the Alliance faces and how we are responding. I'll also look forward to July's NATO summit in Warsaw to explore how we hope to cooperate more closely with partners such as the European Union and to address the important issue of defense spending.
But there's still gaps in the capabilities that NATO would like to see. This is reflected in the capability review that was published by the Dutch defense minister to show what NATO thinks of the problems. So I would hope that more spending could be provided here, and then there's 22 other NATO countries that are below the 2% level of GDP. They too need to pull up their socks and get more serious about defense.
Today, NATO faces a more complex array of challenges and threats than it has since at least the end of the Cold War, and arguably ever. For the first time in its history, allies face major threats from two strategic directions at the same time. Preeminent among these threats, of course, are the provocative actions of a more aggressive and assertive Russia, which continues to display little regard for international law, and the highly complex challenge of an unstable Middle East and North Africa right on NATO's doorstep. A combination of strength and dialogue is the best way, I believe, to bring Russia back into compliance with Helsinki principles and with international law. For Russia to demonstrate its genuine willingness to do that, it must first fully implement its obligations under the Minsk Accords and do its part to bring peace to Ukraine. Until it does that, NATO cannot return to any kind of business as usual. Our principles would not allow it. To effectively deter Russian aggression against NATO countries, especially considering their anti-access and area denial capabilities, we need to go beyond the measures we agreed at Wales, beyond the ability to provide rapid reinforcements. That's why NATO defense ministers, in their meeting in February, agreed in principle to increase our forward presence on the territory of the eastern members of the alliance. At our next summit in Warsaw in July, NATO leaders will agree on the specifics, the scale, scope, and composition of this enhanced forward presence. But I can say already that the forces will be deployed on a rotational basis, and they'll be multinational in character, so that any invading force or little green men would know that if they dared to violate NATO's borders, they would face a robust and combat-capable force made up of troops from across the alliance, Americans, Europeans, and host nation forces, and that the costs of any attempted aggression would be disproportionately high. Now, at Warsaw, we'll not only consider the long-term implications of Russia's foreign and defense policy for NATO, we'll also take steps to address the grave situation along our southern borders. The failure in most countries of the Arab Spring, parts of the Middle East and North Africa have been engulfed by violence and chaos. Once secure states have become fragile, and once fragile states have failed. In Syria, the world has witnessed the deepening of a civil war caused by President Assad's decision to wage war against his own people, a conflict that has now lasted 5 years and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. It's created fertile ground for the rise of ISIL, or Daesh, with its aim of building a caliphate based on violence and a twisted version of Islam.
One of the threats that people very clearly see now is terrorism. And not only terrorism outside the NATO area, but now inside the NATO area. And my question is, what is the contribution NATO is making in that particular area?
We've had a fairly narrow role in the broader global efforts against terrorism, and we do some share intelligence about terrorist movements, terrorist groups. And of course, the Afghanistan mission was a counter-terrorist mission. I think this effort to expand our defense capacity building may be an area where we can do more to help other countries equip themselves to fight terrorism in their own regions and within their own countries, which can include both training of special forces, helping with intelligence, integrating intelligence and military planning. But I think that a lot of the issues that worry Europeans in terms of the homegrown terrorists, well, I think part of the answer to that is to defeat ISIL, which means doing more within the U.S.-led coalition to defeat them in their strongholds in Iraq and Syria, so that the message that ISIL is the future, which is unfortunately helping them recruit thousands and thousands of misguided young people from our own countries, so that message is undercut. Now, NATO is not the first responder to terrorist threats, but we're not standing idly by in the hope that things will improve on their own. All 28 NATO allies are already involved in the U.S.-led coalition to counter ISIL, and while the alliance itself is not involved directly in that fight, we are contributing in other ways. The alliance is working closely with partners in the region to help them to bolster their own security. We're running defense capacity building initiatives with Iraq and Jordan, and training Iraqi officers, for example, in tackling improvised explosive devices, military planning, demining, military medicine, and cyber defense. We're also helping Tunisia strengthen its counterterrorism capabilities and improve its special operations forces. And we stand ready to assist Libya in building its defense institutions if that's requested by the new government of national accord. So, ladies and gentlemen, as an alliance, NATO faces unprecedented challenges in different forms and from different directions. We're adapting, as we always have, to the new security environment in a number of ways. We're strengthening our collective defense to be able to meet any threat against any ally, and we're reaching out to countries around us to help them to become stronger, more resilient, and better able to address security risks and threats in their own regions. The Netherlands plays an essential role in that effort. Whatever challenges we face, we need to be united in our determination to overcome them, something we've done again and again in our 67-year history. Our response to the new security challenges cannot rely on rhetoric alone, and we cannot rely on the perpetual largesse of the United States either. If we're to maintain our own defense while also projecting stability outside our borders, it will require more resources and especially more investment in defense.
The new part that we will add to this at Warsaw is to enhance the forward presence in the Eastern Allied countries so that even before the reinforcements might arrive, any adversary would know that they will run into forces from the whole alliance. There'll be Americans, Europeans, as well as the local forces, and that in that circumstance, they shouldn't even think about aggression. That's what deterrence is all about.